The night the heatwave nearly broke my roommate, I opened my bedroom door and found her standing there in a robe, barefoot, exhausted, and trying desperately not to cry. Her words were quiet, but they carried a kind of fear I had never heard from her before. She wanted to know if she could sleep in my room for one night. What happened after that simple request changed the way I understood loneliness, pride, and the people we think we already know. It was the middle of July in Nashville, Tennessee, and the heat had become almost unbearable. The temperature had stayed above 95 degrees for days, and even after sunset, the air inside our small rented house felt heavy and trapped. I had been living there for almost 8 months with my roommate, Grace, a quiet woman in her late 20s who worked long shifts at a medical office downtown. We were friendly, but we weren't close. We shared groceries sometimes, warned each other when the landlord was coming by, and occasionally watched television in the living room, but there was always an invisible line between us. Grace kept her life private, and I respected that. That evening, I had just finished repairing the old window unit in my bedroom when I heard a strange clicking sound from the hallway. A few seconds later came a frustrated sigh. Then silence. I stepped outside and saw Grace standing beside the thermostat, staring at it like she could somehow convince it to work through sheer desperation. Her bedroom had lost air conditioning completely. She had already called the landlord, but the repair company couldn't come until the next afternoon. If you believe kindness and second chances can change someone's life, take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs a little hope, and subscribe to the channel for more heart-touching stories. Grace tried everything. She placed a fan beside her bed, opened the window, filled a bowl with ice, and even slept for a while on the kitchen floor because it was slightly cooler there. But the heat kept building. Around midnight, I was lying in my cool room when I heard footsteps stop outside my door. There was a soft knock. When I opened it, Grace stood there wearing a simple blue robe, her hair loosely tied back, her face flushed from the heat. She looked embarrassed, almost ashamed, as if asking for help had cost her more courage than she wanted me to see. She explained that she hadn't been able to sleep and that the kitchen floor had become unbearably hot. Then, after a long pause, she asked if she could sleep in my room for the night. I could see how uncomfortable she was making the request. It wasn't flirtation or anything dramatic. It was simply a tired human being admitting that she couldn't handle one more night alone in that heat. I moved my desk chair aside, gave her a clean blanket, and told her she could take the bed while I slept on the couch. She immediately refused, but I insisted. Eventually, she accepted the blanket and settled on the far side of the room while I took the couch. For a while, neither of us said anything. The air conditioner hummed steadily, and the room slowly became peaceful. Then, in the darkness, Grace began to cry. At first, she tried to hide it. But after a few minutes, she quietly admitted that the heat wasn't the only reason she had come to my door. Her mother had passed away the previous year, and since then, every difficult night had felt twice as difficult. She had moved to Nashville believing that a new city and a new job would help her start over. Instead, she had discovered that loneliness could follow you anywhere. She told me she had become very good at pretending everything was fine. She went to work, smiled at people, paid her bills, came home, and closed her bedroom door. Nobody knew how often she sat on the edge of her bed wishing she could hear her mother's voice again. That confession changed something between us. I realized I had been living beside Grace without ever really seeing her. The next morning, we drank coffee together in the kitchen. For the first time, there was no invisible line between us. She laughed about how ridiculous she must have looked standing at my door in the middle of the night, and I admitted that I had never seen anyone look so relieved to discover that an air conditioner actually worked. By afternoon, the repairman arrived and fixed her AC. I thought everything would return to normal after that, but it didn't. Grace started leaving an extra cup of coffee for me in the mornings. I began checking on her after long shifts. We started cooking dinner together, sharing stories about our childhoods, disappointments, dreams, and fears. Slowly, our house stopped feeling like two strangers renting the same space and started feeling like home. Months later, Grace received a job opportunity in another state. It was exactly the kind of promotion she had once dreamed about. But when she told me, she was crying because she didn't want to leave the first place where she had finally stopped feeling alone. I reminded her that home wasn't always a building. Sometimes it was simply the person who opened the door when you were afraid to knock. She accepted the job. On her last night in Nashville, the weather was cool, almost the opposite of that terrible summer night. We stood in the driveway surrounded by packed boxes. Before getting into her car, Grace hugged me tightly and thanked me for something I barely remembered doing. She said that when she stood outside my door that night, she expected embarrassment. Instead, she found kindness. And that kindness reminded her that losing someone she loved didn't mean she had lost everyone. Years have passed since then. We live in different states now, but we still talk regularly. Every summer, when the temperature rises, Grace sends me a message joking that she hopes my AC is working. But I know what she really means. She is reminding me of the night when two roommates stopped being strangers. If this story touched your heart, please like the video, share it with someone who may be quietly struggling, and subscribe. Sometimes a small act of kindness is much bigger than we realize. And before you leave, I have one special request. Comment, "Kindness opens doors," if you believe that being there for someone during their hardest moment can change their entire life. Because sometimes people don't knock on your door because they want something from you. Sometimes they knock because they are exhausted from being strong alone. And sometimes, opening that door doesn't just give them a place to rest. It gives them a reason to believe they aren't alone anymore.